Hi, how's it going? This is Resin of Collinwood for YouTube, and I'm here to continue my read along for the Dark Shadows Daybook, written by Patrick McCray, artwork by Wallace McBride. I am at 1995. Barnabas and Julia elude the destruction of parallel times Collinwood, but find themselves in a dystopic 1995. A future that may not be able they may not be able to avert. Sorry. Episode 1064. As Barnabas struggles in 1995 to assemble the clues of Doomsday, Julia is preoccupied by a dashing ghost, Mrs. Johnson Clarice Blackburn. Julia reels from a psychic influence of Gerard as efforts to negotiate Carolyn about the disaster prove fruitless. The sheriff warns Barnabas and Julia to leave town, and if there were anyone else left alive, they'd smell torches and pitchforks. All the while wondering what would make pitchforks smell like that. 1995 is a fascinating mess. It's a storyline that I want to shake by the lapels and ask it to be more. Think of it. 1995. I've often bemoaned the lack of ray guns and Mailer jumpsuits, and I've just as at least once often championed it for actually getting the era right, down to the 1970s retro that Carolyn sports. It's a vacation for most of the actors, even though the majority of the original cast were absent for much of 1970 parallel time. They were missing from the show because they were shooting House of Dark Shadows. So, yes, they had a vacation coming. The upcoming Ragnarok storyline between 1995 and 1840 is a spare modernist landscape where Roger is woefully missing and Liz might as well be. The post-apocalyptic wasteland of 1995 is a real slap on the backside from the OBGYN to get us breathing in the real world. And it is a real world in the most poetic sense. How long has Collinsport comparatively ignored the PTSD inducing madness regularly unleashed by the town's namesake? Not since Victoria first arrived on the train bound for the beginning and the end of the world has the town been so realistically wigged out by the Collinses. This is a Lovecravian afterbirth of a village in the past. The reliable economic bounty of the cannery kept the locals quietly grumbling, "Thank you, may I have another?" But with the family either dead or insane, I can't imagine there's much left of Collinsport. The house may be in ruin, but so's the local economy. Things are bad. They have to order out to get a sheriff from the south, because we all know that Dana Elker would have had the whole mess cleaned up and would have bested the conspicuously rambunctiously Chuck Morgan in any number of contests involving wrestling, oil lobster bibs, or both. Yes, of course, nude. There's not a lot of story to tell in such ruin and in shocks. On the married levels, Barnabas and Julia spend a lot of time wandering back and forth between Collinwood and Collinsport, looking for clues and finding few. Gerard shows up and starts staring at people, giving them the creeps. But that's about it. In fact, I don't know if I ever watched a 1995 episode with my full attention, and yet it satisfies the inauguration of my favorite storyline, the mind-bendingly fatalistic fall of Collinwood. None of it is fun, and all of it is finally truthful. Haunted houses are not sustainable real estate prospects, and the idea that the Collinses could have lived in one for more than a month is an assertion that needs the pantheon the show gives it. Here, the other of realty has fallen hard, and I think it's for golfing. So, what are they spending their time doing? Talking? Grayson Hall has the unenviable task of the infectious nationalism that Gerard inspires. This is a dark shadows of the post-Mansion era, when the deaths of the soldiers in a senseless war were only an hour or so away on this station. America still had illusions of being a moral empire. Then Vicky arrived from New York. Not so much now, and this is a reflection. There's not much to do. Hunker down like a dog now, and this is a reflection. Hunker down like a dog under a bed after a thunderstorm. Other than muse that the lawn was so much prettier before the tempest, and that's what they do. Julia struggles with a very new form of invasion here. Prior victimizers imposed evil on her. Her fear of Gerard feels different. This is a force that shows her the evil she has within her, and that's a nauseatingly Zen attack. All Gerard need to do is hold up a mirror and let Julia do the rest. Barnabas seems vaguely invulnerable to it because, as he speculates, he's not human. All he is are evil impulses that he's learned to dress up in the suit of goodness. Gerard seems to wisely keep his distance because of it. The episode shines with Clarice Blackburn's surprisingly warm misremembering of Collinwood before the fall. She is inaccurate in her memory of that sunny, happy place. It's true for her, even if it's a lie. She's memorized so often that it eclipses the past in a sense. She's like a viewer of Dark Shadows, who's romanticized what she would like to have been the warmth, have been the warmth in the Collins' home that was all too fleeting. 1995, in episode 1064, particularly, is a chance to see another fan who's let the wishes of memory color the reality of what was. It's a creeping preview of a storyline that would be all too ready to show us the center cannot hold forever, if it ever did. Episode 1070. Can Barnabas forgive Julia's seduction by a malevolent phantom? Before a sheriff from the future exacts vengeance, Professor Stokes, there, David. In the far future of 1995, Barnabas awakens to the Collinsport sheriff trying to kill him. Surviving that, he meets with Julia, and despite her intimate control by an indulgently codified 19th century ghost named Gerard, reassures her of his loyalty. Stokes soon perishes from spectral attacks after a seance, and Barnabas and Julia flee through a time staircase that takes them back to 1970, where a very loud young blonde girl demands to know who they are. Blood, thunder, and all good things, unless you're Professor Stokes, arrive in episode 1070, both wrapping up 1995 and using it as a launch pad for the series' darkest and most daring storyline. Make no mistake, it's also drenched in enough sexual subtext and well text to send all of Knoxville diving under its pews. This is a period of intense episodes where our characters are pushed to their limits, divulging nervous truths and betraying themselves and others. The way they always feared was inevitable. They are our heroes, and under circumstances of total extinctual doom, it remains a challenging storyline to watch. Skipping. Why that. I do it. There you go. Because it removes the one constant of the series. Collinwood will always be home. Well, no it won't. In other news, friends and family members of viewers were being shot at in Vietnam. And the joy of the moon landing was losing altitude. Dark Shadows was as much a product of the Zeitgeist as it was producer of it. When Barnabas declares his fealty to Julia, he means it, but there is also a half-heartedness and desperation lingering under the words that betray their lack of steel. Rather than raft around the edges of the plot and slowly insinuate his evil, as did his predecessors in villainy on the show, Gerard rages a full-on assault as his calling card, and after the Leviathan lethargy and a parallel time villainess who wasn't necessarily there, he's a welcome change, direct and ambiguous. The heroes will have enough ambiguity of their own production in facing him. Julia shows us that in a display of vulnerability that sums up Gerard's powers with exactitude. She betrayed Barnabas for Gerard, and I think she kind of liked it. There's a fear that she'll do it again, and the fear under the surface that I sense is that she will not do it again. And if this isn't reeking of sexual guilt, I don't know what is. Barnabas even greets Julie after her seizure by Gerard by remarking that Julie has been with him. Okay, it's as good a verb as any, but come on. With Jonathan Frid, it has a sense of Victorian reproach that combines disturbingly with Grayson Hall's tightly strung guilt. Her sickened fear at her own potential for harming Barnabas is a disturbing admission of weakness from the Doctor. Thanks to James Storm's oily intensity, it's easy to see why Julia is drawn in, and even easier to see why she seems to feel so dirty about it. Gerard seems to inspire his victims to not only engineer their own destructions, but to want to do so. He is unique in villains in that sense. Gerard is a master in the judo of encouraged self-harm. He is the voice that makes you so curious about jumping off the balcony that the act seems almost inevitable. Humans are masters of self-destruction. All Gerard does is get out of the way and cheer them on. There, David will have more episodes as Elliot Stokes, but knowing that doesn't remove the shock of the endlessly sudden death 1080 also introduces the time staircase, a bizarre invention of the writers that is questionably Victorian in its vague unlikeliness. However, the trips to the other time periods become more common than a quick stop at the Blue Whale. It's tremendously economical. More than that, it's fun. Leave it to Dark Shadows to make a dark, shameful existential apocalypse a fun, dark, shameful existential apocalypse. 1970. Ragnarok. Returning to 1970 primary time, Barnabas battles a Victorian ghost bent on the complete annihilation of Collinwood. Episode 1071. Quentin has his doubts when Barnabas lures him to a closet with the assurance that there's a playroom inside. Barnabas, Jonathan Fripp. Barnabas and Julia arrive from the future and the opposite end of the house to a delighted Quentin, Liz, and their new guest, Carrie Stokes. The professor's niece, Carrie, remains suspicious of the two, perhaps because there's only so much bacon at brunch, and until recently she had it all to herself since David read Maggie's Castaneda book and went vegetarian. Barnabas and Julia set about trying to identify Daphne and Gerard. When Barnabas tries to show Quentin the playroom, he simply fumbles around in the linen closet and shrugs. If there is only one Dark Shadows episode that lurks in my memory as the model for all of the best, it's this one. It's genuinely speculative action. There's mystery, suspense, a supernatural threat, lies, kindness, warmth, kinship, and an optimistic sense of adventure. Dark Shadows is treated as it should be, a home that's held with affection. This bastion is a fortress to be protected, not feared, and its first and last son. Barnabas has such a sense of can-do problem solving. He should be dressed as Athos and demanding that they stop the mechanisms of Dracula and M. Lady at once. Let France fall to the Pope once and for all. I get that image from the way Barnabas bounds into the drawing room with Julia to proudly announce they've arrived back from both parallel time and the future. It's the kind of delivery you'd see Errol Flynn give to Basil Rathbone as balloons fell from the ceiling. And honestly, after arriving back from such exotic destinations, how else is a man to enter? They've been captured Kathy Cody. They've even captured Kathy Cody trying to break into the Assemble, and she's locked in Paul Stoddard's trunk. What is Elliot doing trying to pawn her off at Collinwood anyway? This man hosted Adam, for God's sake. What is Carrie Stokes doing to the upholstery that he dumps her with Liz? She's just warming up for an intensely uncomfortable evening visit to Quentin's bedroom. Seriously, that remark about the strange feeling she's been having, it's the scene where Quentin barely restrains himself from sprinting out of the room and calling his lawyer. Other than that, Collinwood has found a strange equilibrium. Carolyn's in mourning, which has basically sedated her. Liz is in a decent mood, largely because she's had David Selby all to herself. Quentin has ditched the turtleneck for a suit and seems blandly at peace. Comfortable to stand around and look handsome. David and Carrie are busy ignoring the fact that they are almost out of puberty oven. It's best we don't know what they've found snooping in Quentin's sock drawer, but I doubt it's an chain wands and a mummified hand. Life is good. It's that weird calm that soap operas slip into between storylines. It's important to see the house at such ease. Gordon Russell creates an excellent Pax columnist from which it's all going to hell. These are the moments that make us nostalgic in the times to come. For a man charged with preventing a localized apocalypse, Barnabas is in an excellent mood, as well he should be from his heroic high in 1897. He plunges in the Leviathan storyline, only having to work it off in parallel time in 1995. There is an interesting detail to 1995, because it presupposes the absence of Barnabas and Julia. Why are they absent? Presumably because they are in parallel time. What were they doing in parallel time at that hour in those outfits? Barnabas cursed with vampirism. I was hoping he'd be different there. And why was he cursed with vampirism this time? Yet another deal for Josette with another sinister force. Had he recognized his power and thought more compassionately, Barnabas might have used the situation rather than being used by it. He wasn't in a position to do that then. He is now. And he has an ethical mandate to do it with. Arguably, had he been at Collinwood, he might have prevented Gerard's ascent. At least that's what he thinks. Collinwood's full of time travelers. They all have ample evidence to their actions. Can and will change the future. Barnabas has a roadmap to it. It's incorrect. Doom will result. But now Barnabas is ready. Episode 1076. When the power of a gorgeous ghost compels him, will Quentin complete an exorcism before the spirits change David's wardrobe? Quentin, David Selby. Daphne leads Quentin to a graveyard to see familiar tombstones. He vows to help, but it's clear she has mixed intentions. He later tries to exorcise the house, but Daphne's influence stropes him. Meanwhile, Haley goes from slave to the ghost to the realization that she's their prisoner. As she and David attempt a seance, I'm not sure what's going on in this episode or storyline, but I can't stop watching. If anything is my takeaway in Dark Shows, it's that beginning with Vicky's parentage, it's a program about withholding information. 1709 elevates the unspoken to its rarest expression. That kind of ambiguity draws the audience into the storyline, process, and rigor of it. And this is equally demanding and rewarding. Some of the power of Gerard's plan, if we can even call it a plan, is its elusiveness. The ultimate goal is the destruction of Collinwood, but fewer knives have been as serrated, and the horror of Gerard, since we know where it's going, lies in the unnecessary damage he causes those he's marked for death or madness anyway. When the episode isn't revealing in repressed sexuality, it's venturing a little too boldly into deeper taboo on a rubber raft of counterfeit ambiguity. It begins with a visual metaphor so bold there might be no meta left at all. We find Quentin in the graveyard as Daphne points out her own tombstone. Quentin must have some sort of partial memory of being a ghost or being dead, or a sense of it, because even though the timeline has changed, he was once a zombie, after all, and he certainly understands being from another time, given that a dead woman from the 1800s is someone Quentin can't resist. Is she silently imploring his help, or is he simply assuming that, considering that as they begin their embrace, she's holding a knife at his back without his knowing, or his knowledge, sorry. It sums up far, far too many relationships. As the episode goes on, Selby goes to show an amazing range of sincerity and furtiveness as he attempts to exercise the helm, and probably its temptations, eventually sabotaging those same efforts and lying about it. Not only is he lying about it, he's enjoying the process, as he lies to Julia about the extent of Daphne's control at the end of the episode. He has a naughty, hostile smile that is worthy of Jack Torrance, and it's an example of a very human, very subtle moment that exists completely in the face. It rarely has no formal name, but David Selby has a disturbingly degree of control of it nonetheless. David and Haley dominate the rest of the episode into the playroom and role play with dialogue that you have to strain to hear, as single entity that is difficult subtext to comfort because of the singular awkward age of the performers. Both are around 15, neither adults nor children. If an effort not to sexualize them, the show goes too far in the other direction, as it vaguely infantilizes them. The net result feels even more perverse than if they let them be 15. The exact reason for insisting that David dress up and submit to the whim of a beautiful ghost, who is nearly his age, here is unclear and disturbing. Because of that murkiness, the substitute costumes only further this. The selected outfits of both the early 70s and the 1840s, they are the costumes of the former child or a very finical adult. Which is it? Which does Gerard want them to be? All of it? Long as it's in paralyzing quantities, Gerard wants the adult, David, to know exactly what's being done to him, while the child, David, knows he's powerless to stop it. Episode 1079. Will the haunting scent of lilacs bring Quentin to the ghost of his dreams? Or will he play into Gerard's evil plans? Julia Grayson Hall. During the lunar eclipse, the children find the playroom, and Haley seems possessed by a woman from an earlier time. She doesn't remember this later, but Daphne's ghost reappears to tempt her with a Regency era dress. Meanwhile, a loveless Quentin spots Daphne's grave, and a dream appearance by her becomes reality when lilacs mysteriously appear in the drawing room. On the podcast in which Wallace, Will McKinley, and I discussed Night of Dark Shadows, we agreed that the film was more of an art form than a horror movie. If that motif has a beginning for the franchise, it's right around here. It's tough to write about the Ragnarok sequence without meditating on both. Its difference from the rest of the franchise and its representation of it. In fact, it's becoming an annual tradition at the Daybook. It needs advocates, and those are tough to find. The reasons, as 1706 shows us, it's not fun. It's vaguely highbrow when it comes to characters who've been with a program from the beginning. Barnabas and Julius seem more desperate and less certain than ever. Quentin is joyless and joyously untrustworthy. Visually, the fashions and hair make it stand out widely from what we are used to from most of the show. Most importantly, it's a downer. Other storylines are about averting probable doom. In this, it's about witnessing a protracted inevitability. The minute we see characters in period costumes and know that at least two time portals exist within the house, it's clear that this is headed to 1840. Do we really have to see Maggie become diseased and insane and bedridden to make that happen? Soaps thrive on cliffhangers. Ragnarok is a checklist of bad things we know will happen. The trick is this sequence is adjusting expectations. This is not Lyndon Johnson's Dark Shadows, it's Richard Nixon's. And that's okay. Before the series was about who and what, who was behind the door, what is Barnabas going to do next. Now it's more a show about when and how. Gerard is a prime sadist, and like a moderer, Patofe attacks his opponent's weakness with Surrey-like precision. Haley is shuffled between homes and his approach is to show her an error in which she has meaning waiting for her. David, growing up too suddenly, up too fast, enjoys a playroom and alternate identity that literally turns way back the clock. And Quentin gets a terrible, manipulative girlfriend. There's a reason that Commander Riker turned away Q's powers on TNG, and Cheetah rejected Michael's opposite tortures on the Good Place. As anyone who falls into the gifting repressive trap can tell you, it's never good. Yes, there is some mystery and suspense if this sequence is as much a chance to actually be with the characters, and the combined David Haley sequences are offset by the ones with Quentin and Julia. Where do the latter go to think? Of course, Quentin would go to a cemetery, and what's that like for him, even under normal circumstances? He remembers so many of the years on both ends of these lives. And of course, he would flirt with Julia for Quentin. She's an unthinkably younger woman. When Quentin muses about needing a woman, Julia says he wants a drinking partner. Perhaps she's missing a drinking partner and hinting for one. And he's hinting as well. Of course, he puts down the glass. She drops the subject. And everyone remains good, sober friends. No wonder this doesn't feel like the traditional Dark Shadows, this is padding. You bet. Is it padding with great characters and touching? I'm not skipping pages, right? Yes, what the hell. Alright. Sorry. Revealing moments right again. And it's worth it for that. Episode sorry. Episode 1093. When David and Haley prepare a new sinister resident for the dollhouse, Sebastian confronts disturbing news about Maggie. Sebastian Shaw, Christopher Peanock. After witnessing a vision of themselves in the dollhouse, David and Haley decide to create a third doll to eventually join them. It is a blonde woman named Letitia. Sebastian becomes concerned when he hears that Maggie has been bitten by an animal. As Maggie descends into illness, she can hear Carolyn humming the music box theme from the playroom. There are stories that many original audiences members for the Universal Frankenstein and Dracula had to be carried out on stretchers. While I'm sure that some of it came from Universal publicity office, I'm just as sure that other people were that authentically frightened by what they saw. It seems like an alien concept now. The modernized Frankenstein is more of a sad movie than a frightening one. Dracula faces the same struggle. Another film cursed by quaint It Happens. Dark Shadows is a similar victim to our evolving sense of horror. Even as a kid, Dark Shadows was never scary to me. Maybe if I'd been younger, 6 or 7. But I was 11, and it was no Kingdom of the Spiders. I loved it. Though it wasn't horror, it was its own genre, and whatever the genre was, I preferred it to anything not involving Clinton's barbarian women or Jerry Reed driving and excessive velocities. Still, I always wondered what it would have been like to have been scared by Dark Shadows. In 2012, in broad daylight, I got the chance. I was watching the episode during my 45th day marathon viewing the series with a friend. We'd seen the episodes, and despite that, and the bright June sunshine that filled the room, he and I were stunned by the episode. The big moment is actually at the end of the prior installment, meaning it's also at the beginning of this one. As David and Haley look into the dollhouse of Rose Cottage, their giant eyes loom over a vision of their tiny, expressionless duplicates sitting in the dollhouse, where Gerard intends to trap their souls forever. The juxtaposition was a disturbing, unexpected image. It has a strange, implicable logic, which more closely approximates a dream than anything else I've seen on TV. That kind of citation is usually a cop-out, but there's no other term for it. It's a seemingly beaten image with deeply uncontrollably sinister implications. I know vampires don't exist, and I know that werewolves don't exist. But dollhouses exist. I used to build them. And what are dollhouses but an attempt to control a little world? That desire comes from somewhere. Thus, to see yourself, not a doll of yourself, but yourself hypnotically imprisoned and one as a willing victim. That's a nightmare composed of elements all too familiar. It ties into why the pre-1840 Ragnarok sequence is so disturbing. It reeks of an inevitability, doom, knit partly out of the characters, complicit in their own decay, and partly out of their total inability to stop it. Partly. A vampire you can stop, an invading ghost you can stop, but a corruption like this, to which you're a willing participant, this is more quietly gothic than anything prowling around a graveyard in a cave in fans in moonlight. This, for lack of better term, is real. Part of the most repellent sadness in the sequence is the sense of very believable surrender by the characters. David and Haley, and even the future dollhouse resident Carolyn, and abandoned children. This is underlined by the frequent absence of Roger and Liz, who were even at their best dysfunctional parents who only occasionally made up for it with sentimental speeches and half-hearted hugs. Worst of all is Maggie, also decaying and desolate after seeing her successfully fight the man for so long. She also just seems to be giving up. This is the closest to the actual world as the show got. Real people can't be expected to thrive for years under such relentless indifference and abandonment, not to mention constant threats to life and limb. This sequence is an ugly wake-up call to the fact that living in a spook house isn't glamour and cool lighting. Perhaps that's why many who love the show have such a tough time with this sequence. I have a tough time with this sequence. At the same time, I know that there is a deeper reality being exposed. It's a memo that Dark Shadows isn't fun and games. Childhood ends, even as we descend deeper and deeper into the dollhouse. The 60s would end, Camelot would end. Thus, we are here perfectly staged for the necessity of the 1840 sequence. We have to examine our past. We have to forgive. We have to ask more of ourselves and each other if we are to ever rebuild and return. We have to be the Barnabas absolving Angelique. We have to be the Angelique looking past the smoke and mirrors of our shortcut parlor tricks to take responsibility for who we must become. If all good things come to an end, so do all bad things. Moments like these give the real Dark Shadows meaning, and we might fight to earn them. Give me 1 second. I did not hit the code. Yeah. So, when I come back tomorrow, episode 1101, guys, is what I'll be doing tomorrow. I am, again, really enjoying this. I'm going to read more tomorrow. You guys have a great night. Link to the Dark Shadow, where you can pick up the Dark Shadows Daybook, written by Patrick McCray, artwork by Wallace McBride, will be in the description box. I'm going to make some channel announcements probably Monday, probably tomorrow. So for September, because August is almost over and my wife's birthday is coming up. So you guys have a good night. Bye.